Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Did you know that the fastest growing part of the world's waste stream is e-waste, which essentially is unwanted or unusable consumer electronics? And that's because as technology continues to improve or evolve at a faster and faster rate, electronics become outdated more quickly. And electronic items shouldn't really be thrown into the trash or in landfills because they contain toxins such as lead, mercury, and they can leach into the soil and water supplies. So in case you didn't know, electronics should be recycled responsibly. So today I've invited John Shagarian, co-founder, chairman and CEO of ERI, which is the largest recycler of e-waste, which is the largest recycler of e-waste in the US. And they're also the largest cybersecurity focused hardware destruction and electronic waste recycling company. So I wanted to learn more about that. And have you ever thought that when you throw something away that contains all your personal details, how easy it would be for somebody to break into that device and get valuable information? And today's guest also wrote a book about hardware hacking called The Insecurity of Everything, which went on to be an Amazon bestseller, and he also earned a certification in cybersecurity, managing risk in the information age from Harvard University, and completed the MIT Sloan cybersecurity program. So it's fair to say he knows what he's talking about. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to California, where John is waiting to talk about e-waste and share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about how you got here and share your origin story with everyone?
Yeah, well, when looking backwards, Neil, it's always a little more fun than looking forwards, because backwards you can sort of more easily connect the dots. And I grew up in Queens, New York City. It's one of the 5 boroughs there. And I had a great childhood growing up. And I was very lucky. My dad was a serial entrepreneur and my mom was a social worker. So it sort of created this passion for both entrepreneurship and this wonderful world of capitalism. But because of my mom being a social worker, it created a version of conscious capitalism in me. And I was off to the races as a young guy. Quite literally speaking, I wanted to be a jockey, the kind of jockey that we see on racehorses here in the United States, and of course in UK and all around Europe. And it was just really my dream when I was 10 years old. But my parents made me aware very little that I was already too big to be a jockey. So I became a harness driver at a young age. And it was my first lesson in that when you have a dream, if the circumstances are not permitting for that dream to become a reality, that you could always adjust and tweak the dream if you're flexible and still make it become a reality in another shape or form. And I had a very successful career driving racehorses. When I was 17, I became the youngest driver of a standardbred racehorse in the United States to set a world's record. And that set me on a great path, because I realized then that I could put my mind and my work ethic to anything that I wanted to do, and I could find success. And so I just embarked from there to create other ventures along the way. And some of them are more notable than others, like every serial entrepreneur. Homeboy Industries I co-founded after what were then called the Rodney King riots, which are now called the LA riots in 1992 and 93 with Father Greg Boyle. And it still exists. And Father Greg Boyle does a fantastic and beyond amazing job running it and being the visionary and growing it over the last 30 years. And then I created financialaid.com in 1998, the year Google was founded. And every in Silicon Valley threw me out of their office and my partners out of their office, my 2 partners, Matt and Mike O'Brien. And our goal was to democratize student lending. And even though every VC threw us out of their office and told us we didn't know anything about the internet, and by the way, Neil, who knew anything about the internet? It was the year Google was founded. It became a really, really great venture, very profitable from the 3rd month of inception. And we sold that in 2004 to CIT, which was one of the oldest and best and biggest banks in North America. And then we embarked on the journey that you and I are going to be talking about today, which was ERI. One of my employees at financialaid.com came with me, and he wanted to do a new venture. He brought on one of his friends, Aaron Blum. So my employee, Kevin Dillon, and then his friend, Aaron Blum, and I and my wife created ERI. And ERI was called Electronic Recyclers International. And that was the answer for what was then the fastest growing solid waste stream in the world, which was electronic waste, which was the dark side and the backside of this wonderful technological revolution, which we're still all enjoying. And we embarked in 2004, and we set our journey to make a successful brand and help cure the e-waste crisis. And that's how we started. And now, almost 18 years later, we're the largest brand of e-waste recycling and data destruction in North America. When I say we're a responsible e-waste recycler, what that really means in our terminology, Neil, is that when we last month, we took in 20 million pounds of electronic waste. And that means we processed 20 million pounds under zero waste, zero landfill, and zero emissions. That means all of the commodities that we extracted from the destruction of that electronic waste with our proprietary shredding machines, all of the destruction created commodities, steel, aluminum, plastic, copper, silver, gold, lead, palladium, cobalt, and nickel that went all back for beneficial reuse. None of it went to a landfill. None of it got shipped off our shores and got put and shipped our trash to other countries inappropriately. So it's a great story when done the right way. Everybody wins. The environment wins, jobs are created, and all the materials go back for beneficial reuse. And that's the short version of how I got here today, Neil.
Wow, what an incredible story. And there's a big reason that I ask that question to every one of my guests, I think, because all too often we celebrate somebody's success or a business's success, and we don't see that great, rich story behind it. And it very seldom starts with somebody thinking, I want to work in the tech industry. And yours just brought that to life with stories of being a jockey and a driver and right. So much else going on, and being thrown out of the VC's offices there back in the early noughties. And it's so important, I think, for startup founders right here and today to hear stories like that. And it's all about the ride and all about the journey.
Neil, you're so right. It is about the journey. And there's nobody that I know that's made a success in their career or life that's had a straight line to success. There's always zigs, there's zags, there's ups, there's downs, there's near-death experiences, near death of the baby that you've created, of the organization that you've created. And there's the ones that make it are the ones that are flexible, resilient, and persevere through it all, and just see their vision to the other side.
And I'd also say, after 2,000 interviews on this podcast, it's very often the importance of the role of serendipity. And it almost feels that when you put in all that hard work, the universe gives you that little nudge in the right direction when you need it, doesn't it?
You know, Neil, that's a great point. You know, what I really I don't appreciate, and when I watch people who are really quite successful on all different levels, and they don't credit serendipity, luck, good fortune, whatever you're going to call it, great timing, because yes, the hard work has to happen, but also some good fortune and good luck needs to break your way. And if you're ready, and if you're prepared and you put the hard work in, and you're able to then maximize that opportunity at that right time, then yes, you're going to break through and be a big success. But good fortune and serendipity always plays a role in anybody's success story.
100% with you there. And fast forward to 2022, you are a co-founder of ERI, the largest recycler of e-waste across the US. And you started out in the business recycling electronic waste for environmental and sustainability reasons before it was even a thing, if we're honest with each other. But your focus is now shared with data destruction. So how did that evolution come about?
Yeah, well, as you say, and you're so right, when we started the business, it was all about keeping all these potentially toxic electronic devices, which all have in them cadmium, lead, beryllium, arsenic, mercury, and other hazardous materials that if it gets into our landfills, which typically get rained upon, which then typically have liners that leak in them, and then that material would then get into our water and ground supply, which then, of course, gets into our vegetation, animals, and peoples. It was a great reason to start the business, and it's a great reason for us to stay in this business, to keep these potentially hazardous devices out of landfills and from being shipped off our shores. And so that was a great reason and honorable and still is. But what happened, Neil, as happens in any journey, is you sort of also not only stay focused on the task at hand and the day-to-day work of building your organization, but you keep your eyes open to the vistas in front. And one of the things we saw was in 2003, the beginning of Palantir in Silicon Valley, which was then deemed more of a cybersecurity venture, backed by Peter Thiel, the very famous serial investor who was one of the first, if not the first investor in Facebook and many, many other successful ventures, and was the co-founder of PayPal. So he was also part of the PayPal mafia that gave us all these great people like Elon Musk and many, many others. Then you had the beginning of LifeLock in Arizona in 2007, which focused on data privacy and the privacy of individuals. And then you had the rise of all these unicorn cybersecurity companies on the software side that became very special and unique, handled certain problems on the software side. And we started talking about hardware data destruction and the data that's contained in your old hardware in about 2012. And Neil, again, everybody told us we were nuts. They looked at us like we were green Martians until 5 years later. Again, when you say serendipity takes place, here's the serendipitous event when it comes to data destruction. I was at a cybersecurity conference in Manhattan in the middle of New York City, and there happened to be a gentleman named Robert Hackett at that conference, and he was the lead writer for Fortune magazine on cybersecurity. He, by the way, he still is. Mm-hmm. And Robert met me there, and he heard what I had to say on hardware data destruction and the importance of making sure we don't benignly neglect or misappropriate our old hardware devices when they come to their end of life. And he handed me his business card. He said, "Give me your business card." And I did. He says, "I'll call you in about a week." And about a week later, he calls and says, "Listen, I spoke to my editors here at Fortune magazine, and they can't believe that we've missed telling the story and the topic that you discussed at last week's conference on the importance of hardware data destruction. We've only covered the software side of the cybersecurity ecosystem." He goes, "Can we do a story on you?" And I said, "On your company, ERI?" And I said, "Of course." So he wrote this lovely story on ERI and the importance of data destruction. And the story and the title of the story, Neil, was "Dead but Not Forgotten." and the last two sentences of the story and the article summed it all up. It said, "It turns out that electronic waste is not only an environmental hazard, but a cybersecurity one as well." And as you just pointed out 5 minutes ago, that was our serendipitous moment. We took that article and we bought every Fortune magazine we could. We gave it to our sales team. We told them, mail it out to every client we have and mail it out to every potential client we have. And then we were off to the races, Neil. And our business has exploded since that moment. And all of a sudden, our preaching of the importance of hardware data destruction, which had been going on since 2012, we were able to prosecute that point now, and we were vindicated because of that article, which was absolute serendipity, total good fortune, and we made the most of it. And here we are in 2022, and our business has doubled since 2017.
Wow, incredible. I absolutely love that. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, though, now and say, what's more important when it comes to e-waste? Is it environmental protection or data protection? I usually try and steer clear of binary arguments, but I'm going to have a bit of fun with you on that one.
Well, I'm going to date myself, Neil. I'm 59 years old, so I'm going to use a term that I hope a lot of your listeners understand. But you've asked me the Sophie's choice of my business. the what's more important? What are we gonna? What's the one that I favor more? And the real truth of the matter is, Neil's this: there's nobody that I know that I've met along the way in this wonderful journey of life that doesn't want to leave the world and with their children and their grandchildren with cleaner water and cleaner air. We all agree that we want to leave this wonderful planet that we inherited when we were born a better place by the time we get off this great journey. So the environment is near and dear to my heart. Growing up with racehorses and my dad being one of the first people to bring windmill energy to America in the late 70s, I've been loving the environment and loving the beauty of animals and this great world that we have since I was a child. So the environment is very important to me. But the issue of data destruction and knowing now what could happen to whether it's just a person's household or to a huge organization, if their data gets into the hands of cyber criminals, is also potentially catastrophic. So I would tell you this: out of 10 new clients that come to us on a monthly basis, 7 out of 10 favor now the importance of data destruction when they come to us, but they all make sure that we do everything in such an environmentally correct way that they're thrilled that they have the 1-2 punch of both environmental protection, which they can report back to their board of directors, and if they're publicly traded, to Wall Street and the analysts and everybody that covers them and their constituents who buy or use their products or services. But also we protect them from the horrible liability that exists if they had a catastrophic event with regards to a data breach. And let me just give you the real stats, Neil, on data breaches. In 2015, much against what our parents taught us when we were growing up, that crime doesn't pay. In 2015, the cyber criminals successfully stole from people around the world $3 trillion. 6 years later, Neil, these same cyber criminals successfully stole in 2021 $6 trillion. It doubled. Wow. So my point is, cyber crime is on the rise, and we've got to protect ourselves. And that's one of our important services here at ERI, to protect the citizens of our clients and our constituents around the world, not only in North America, but then also to protect the environment at the same time, concurrently with destroying the data. So even though it's a Sophie's choice, I give it a 50-50, and they're both equally important, because there's no way to have a safe and better world unless we do both of those important activities.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And you have talked at length about e-waste being one of the fastest growing waste streams out there in the world. But do you anticipate this trend is only going to continue?
Yeah, when we got in the business, it was the fastest growing solid waste stream in the world back in 2004. But Neil, the truth of the matter is, it's now the fastest growing solid waste stream by an order of magnitude of 2 to 4 times the second fastest growing solid waste stream, which is plastic. So why did the problem expand? Because of all these wonderful gadgets. Electronics, Neil, as you and I both know with our own family lives and everything else, electronics have become ubiquitous to our lives. So think about what's happened since 2004, the explosion of wearables and cars becoming computers on wheels, and the Internet of Things and Nest and Ring and all the other electronic gadgets, robots and drones and everything else that we're surrounded with. So electronics are only growing, and they're making our lives more interesting, both business and our professional lives more interesting and more interconnected. But the problem has expanded. And here's what the UN said back in 2018, that only 17% of all the electronics that we all get to enjoy and use on this planet are being responsibly recycled when they come to the end of life. So there's an 83% delta for us to go tackle as good citizens around the planet, and to make the world a better place. The opportunity for new entrepreneurs to come in this space is huge. The opportunity for all the stakeholders that are involved, OEMs, retailers, government, and also the citizens that use the electronics, to band together and to find better solutions so we can recycle more. The opportunity is large. So we feel here at our company, it's like the top of the second inning right now. We feel like we just started and we're just warming up.
And just to bring this topic to life for people listening all over the world and help them understand how serious a problem hardware hacking is. What are some of the devices that typically store personal data that people don't even think about when they
that's a
just
great
throw them
question.
away?
Yeah, well, cars for one, Neil,
Yeah.
all the EV cars now have hard drives in them. So when you say, for instance, you traveled to out of your where you live and went to another country to go to a conference per se, and you rented a car when you got to that conference, and the car gave you different prompts, and you're driving and you're trying to pay attention to the road, but you're also trying to set the car up so it'll be most comfortable for the time you're going to use it, and you press a bunch of these prompts and you weren't even sure what all of them were. Well, in many instances, these prompts are asking you to download any of the information that are in your devices that you're carrying with you in your briefcase. It could be your cell phone, it could be your laptop, it could be your tablet. So by the time you return that car back to the leasing agency, or if you lease a car instead of buying a car, or if you buy a new car, it downloads all of your information in. So you're able to do voice activation when you call your mom or your dad or your wife or your business client. You don't even have to press buttons anymore. But all that comes with responsibility, that once that car goes back, if the wrong person gets their hand on that automobile, they have all your data, all of it, not only your contacts, but your banking information, your other personal identification. It could be your social security number, could be your date of birth, and other things. So the wrong person gets your car after you use it, could be catastrophic. Same thing goes, think about your home or office. Your copier machine and your fax machine both have hard drives. Every copy that comes through that copier machine or that fax machine are all stored on those devices. If those devices get in the wrong people's hands, there's a massive opportunity for a data breach and for them to reverse engineer a lot of people's personal information and personal data and be able to harm a lot of people, because all the copies that ever existed on that fax machine or a copy machine are all there.
I know I recently stayed in a hotel. I had a smart TV in there, and I came across on that TV there was Netflix and Disney Plus and Spotify, and there was 3 separate user accounts, not a corporate IT for the corporate IT account for the business and the hotel there, but it was actually guests that had just left everything logged in with all their details. So that's something to think about as well. But what can people and businesses do to be more responsible in terms of responsibly recycling their electronics and protecting data at the end of a device's life, other than just leave it in a man drawer somewhere?
It's important to choose a recycler. Anywhere where your listeners are listening, whether it's in the UK or any other great country in Europe or South America or Asia or in North America, there's responsible recyclers all around the world. And I'll give you the most important certifications for that recycler to have. You should make sure that recycler on the environmental side either has R2 or E-Stewards certifications. Those are the best 2. We happen to have both, but R2 or E-Stewards are the best 2 environmental certifications. And when it comes to responsible data destruction, NAID, National Association of Information Destruction, that's the best organization that certifies responsible recyclers, both in paper shredding and data that's on paper, but also in hardware destruction, hardware shredding. And if the recycler doesn't have an environmental certification or a NAID certification, NAID, you shouldn't be using that recycler, because your data is at great risk.
And for any business leaders listening anywhere in the world, what can they be doing to learn more about sustainability practices and data protection? Where would you send them to?
Yeah, again, the certifying bodies are very, very important. Yeah. And the websites of some of the bigger and better brands, we're just one of them. And our website's www.ERI, like Ernie, Richard, Ingrid, direct.com. There's a lot of information. We have hundreds of pages of information on responsible practices. And for CEOs or other leaders of great organizations, it's so important, because the liability now that comes with responsible e-waste recycling is massive, both from your constituents and your investors, but also the liability on the insurance that comes with a potential data breach and a loss of goodwill and loss of clients is massive and potentially catastrophic. And so don't let benign neglect get in the way of running a successful e-waste recycling program at your organization. That's the one rule of advice I'd give every leader out there.
Fantastic. And I've loved chatting with you today. But before I let you go, a question I've got to ask is, what drove you to write the Insecurity of Everything book? And what was the one thing and possibly hope that people took away from your book there?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't to be Shakespearean or anything like that, or to be the great next American novel, best-selling novel. But we wrote the book just as an education tool, Neil. And just to explain everything that we've just been discussing on this wonderful podcast. And we put examples in there of devices and real life examples of breaches that have happened with very bad results. And we explain how easy it is to do the right thing if you just put some lean into it a little bit and put some effort and have your colleagues at your organization really focus on this. They can put together a very, very responsible e-waste, hardware, data destruction program that both protects the environment and protects your organization. All the examples in the book, and because you were so kind to invite me on your podcast today, I'll say this. Anyone who writes to me an email or writes to you, Neil, and would like a free copy of the book, we're happy to send them a free copy of the book because it's just an education tool. We didn't write it to make money. We just want people to make better and more informed decisions when it comes to the disposal of their old hardware.
That's an incredibly generous offer, and I, for one, will be taking you up on that.
Wonderful.
Love to get my hands on that. And before I let you go, I'm going to have a bit of fun with you now as well. And that is, some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. So I'm going to ask a question now. We started talking about serendipity and the universe making things happen a few moments ago. So is that a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Because he or she might just hear this and maybe we could make something happen, but let's test it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of people on my list because I love reading and I love listening to podcasts, and there's so much great information out there on this planet. But if there's one person I had to choose right now, I'd say it's Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman he's done it so right. He's so brilliant. He's so smart. He's so articulate on how he takes complex issues and simplifies them and makes them doable. He's the founder of LinkedIn and many, many other great ventures. And he just does it right. And man, I would love to have lunch with him. I've had the honor to see him speak live in person at some conferences and on the stage. He's even more fun than on a podcast. And if I could just have lunch with him one day, it would just be a total honor and joy.
Well, we'll send that out into the universe. If anything comes of that, you've got to promise me that you'll get back in touch and let me know. But
I will take a picture and I'll send it to you directly, Neil, if anything comes with that. Okay? How's that?
Brilliant. You got yourself a deal. And for anyone listening that would just like to find out more information about anything we talked about, as well as request a copy of that book, if they just want to find out more information, look at your website or maybe even contact you or your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
The best starting point is our website, www.eri, that's Ernie, Richard, Ingrid, direct.com, eridirect.com. And if they want to email me personally, it's JSS, like John, Sam, at eridirect.com. I'm happy to field any of your personal emails and ask me for a free copy of your book, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today. Every day I try and tackle a completely different topic. And in 2,000 interviews, this is the first time I've talked about a cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction and electronic waste recycling company. And it's such an important message. And when you told that story about talking with Fortune magazine and the writers there, I've just had that exact same epiphany and why we're not talking about it more often. So thank you so much for raising that and sharing your story with me today.
Neil, it's been an absolute honor and joy, and thank you for hosting me today. I love your podcast, and I'm just so grateful that you invited me on today. Thank you again.
John is so passionate about the circular economy, and I cannot thank him enough for discussing with me today what that means and how e-waste plays a pivotal role. So we've left the conversation today with the knowledge that the fastest growing part of the world's waste stream is e-waste. All those unwanted or unusable consumer electronics that we have. So has this conversation today made you think differently about the subject? And how much tech do you throw away? And what happens when the updates stop arriving on your devices? Do you ever think about that when you go out to buy a new smart television, for example? Do you know how long that manufacturer is going to support that device, going to keep those updates coming, or when they essentially brick it? And it's not just smart TVs. We've got everything from toasters, fridge freezers, microwaves. All these devices could be bricked at any moment, leaving them useless, which is just adding to this e-waste problem. But you've heard my views on this today. You've listened to John as well, who's incredibly knowledgeable. But I now want to throw the microphone back to you. So please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Let me know your thoughts, any questions you might have, and equally if you want to come on here and talk about this topic and keep the conversation going, whatever it is, please do that. You can also get me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @NeilCHughes. But don't just hit the follow or connect. Send me a little message. Tell me you listen to the podcast and I will reply straight back, as long as you've not got a sales pitch for me, of course. Why do people still do that on LinkedIn? There's a topic for another day. So keep those messages coming in. I'm now going to spin the wheel and see what topic we're going to discuss tomorrow. Today was all about e-waste. Where do we go from here? What we're going to talk about tomorrow? Well, for the answer to that and where the wheel stopped, you're going to have to join me again tomorrow, I'm afraid. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.